Hey friend, welcome to Grounded, the vestibular podcast. I'm Dr. Madison Oak, aka the Vertigo Doctor. I am the vestibular physical therapist who is here to help you with all things dizziness, imbalance, and vertigo. In this podcast, we explore the fascinating world of vestibular disorders. Come with me as we dive headfirst into a journey to discover the mysteries of the brain, the inner ear, and the balance mechanisms that keep us grounded. Whether you've been managing dizziness for one day or 25 years, we're going to get real about what it takes to manage dizziness, handle the anxiety cycle, and thrive, not just survive, with your vestibular disorder. First, I want to remind you that this is never medical advice. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes only and may not be the best fit for you and your personal situation. It shall not be construed as medical advice. The information and education provided here is not intended or implied to supplement or replace professional medical treatment, advice, and or diagnosis. Always check with your own physician, medical professionals, and healthcare team before trying or implementing any information found here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Grounded. I have Josie Persistent with me today, who I'm really excited to talk to you guys about. She has been on the Win of the Week multiple times now on this podcast and always is sharing something really fun she's been doing. And so I'm really excited that you're here. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know it's busy.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you.
Absolutely. So I would love if you kind of introduced yourself, kind of tell us anything you're comfortable telling us about your vestibular disorder, where you might be from, any of those things. And we can go from there.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Josie. I'm Canadian. I live in southwestern Ontario. It's just starting to get chilly here, but it's really, really nice. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have a wonderful husband and a 6-year-old son. He's in grade 1. And I just love spending time with my families. I love getting outdoors, going for walks, and I love to read. I love to listen to audiobooks. I love building Lego with my son. We have a lot of Lego. As you know, too much Lego. I really enjoy it. It's a good workout for the vestibular system too. Sitting on the floor, you're looking down, and it requires some hand-eye coordination.
Absolutely.
So take note of these things now. So I'm also one of your members in Vestibular Group Fit. It's been almost a year, about 10 or 11 months since
That's so crazy.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about my story and share everything I've learned since becoming a member.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks so much for all the things. And
Yeah.
some of my favorite things are literally seeing you're like, I have built this Lego with my son, and then you
Yep.
posted a picture of that time. Like, I love it because we were recently with our nephews, my husband and I, and all we did for like hours was play Legos, and I thought of you. Actually,
Did you?
I did. I totally did. We were building the tallest tower possible.
Amazing.
Amazing. Okay, so tell me about your history and your story of getting diagnosed. Like, how did that go? What were your symptoms like? And I know it could be a long story, so let us know.
It is and it isn't. It's my story began last fall in 2023. So over the course of a few weeks, I had 3 very severe and very debilitating vertigo attacks out of nowhere. And I just kind of woke up one day to full room spinning vertigo. I was vomiting. I had nystagmus. I was like, I couldn't walk. I couldn't focus. It was pretty bad. I ended up in an ambulance. I was in the hospital, and their best diagnosis at that time was BPPV, which
Classic.
I had never heard of. And obviously I was just like, okay, that sounds fine. I accepted it. And they gave me a printout of how to do the Epley maneuver and sent me home with it. You're rolling your eyes. I am too now. But at the time I'm like, okay, I hope this doesn't happen again. And so
not your fault.
that attack was about 6 hours long. And then a couple weeks after that, I had another one that was about 12 hours. That was over the Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. So I was out that whole weekend. We had to cancel everything. It was brutal. And then 10 days after that one, I had the third and worst one. It was 30 plus hours of room spinning vertigo. It was brutal. So I ended up in the hospital again. And this time they admitted me because they kind of saw that there might be something a little bit more going on, and they ran some tests. And I do recall one of the doctors that I was with at the time was like, I'm not entirely convinced this is BPPV. This sounds to me like it's labyrinthitis or neuritis or possibly Meniere's. Again, I'm like in a full attack, so I'm not really understanding what she's saying. And they did ask if I had any like whooshing or tinnitus or any hearing loss, and I guess they were trying to rule out some stuff. I didn't have any of that. It was just, they kept saying it was a mechanical issue and not a central issue, which again at the time didn't know what that means, but I know what that means now. So all the blood work, the CT scan, everything's coming back normal. And I was in the hospital for 2.5 days. They gave me a steroid taper and some meds to kind of help me with the attack, and it eventually dissipated. And I did have a doctor come in who decided to give me the Epley maneuver for whatever reason. And I think it was just at that time that the attack was sort of coming down on its own. It was coinciding with him doing the Epley, and he was like, oh, okay, I think this might have fixed it. And I was like, okay, great. So it's all just sort of confusing now looking back on it, but I guess they went back to that it was BPPV and that it was just a pretty bad attack. So that's what I was sent home with. I was really shaken. I was really weak and nauseous. I was exhausted. I was very anxious because I was like, what was that? Is that going to come back? And I was really, really scared that it would. It didn't.
Absolutely.
That was the acute phase of my attack. And then, so I guess fast forward the next couple of months, I was feeling really awful. Like I was tired, I was nauseous, I was anxious, I was sleeping a lot, and it was a pretty bad time. And I felt like my recovery was really slow because from what I was seeing, like going down the rabbit hole of BPPV online with not very good education, I was like, I don't think people are supposed to feel this horrible after. This doesn't really make sense. Like it just wasn't really clicking for me. And I was like, either my diagnosis is wrong or I'm just going to feel like this forever. And both of those options were just terrifying. And I was really anxious. I had a lot of bad days and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start to make myself feel better. So, and then I found you on Insta and I started following you, and just the way that you were explaining things and stating the differences and all the different kinds of vestibular disorders, it really started resonating with me. Like I was like, okay, I'm not the only one feeling weird and dizzy and floaty, and I have this brain fog and I feel like I'm drunk when I go to the store, and everything was challenging. Like getting in a car was challenging, and I needed some help to figure out how to do those things. And it was also the first time I had heard of triple PD. And that clicked for me because I was like, okay, that sounds like what I was going through, because it had been months of feeling off. Like the vertigo had stopped. It was like I could pinpoint those 3 attacks very, very clearly, but everything else, like, so when I would call my doctor and say like, I don't feel that great, and he's like, well, are you having an attack? And I'm like, well, no, but like, so they didn't really know how to help me or what to do. And they were just saying like, it just takes some time, like you'll get better. And I was like, but I don't feel like I'm getting better. So anyway, that's kind of where I was. And then I joined Group Fit in January. So January 2024, I didn't even get a proper diagnosis until July 2024. So it took several months. I was on a wait list. And then I finally met with my ENT and I explained everything to her. And she diagnosed me with vestibular neuritis. She had told me that I had a cluster of attacks. And because they were within a few weeks of each other, that can kind of, because I thought vestibular neuritis was like a one-time event, and she said it usually is, but it can happen in a series or in clusters. And she's like, these are very like, she's like, the criteria for these things, they're all like, they're specific things, but they can overlap, and it's all
100%.
really confusing. Yeah, very complicated. So, and she did think that I had developed some sort of triple PD after those months after the acute phase, because I was having a lot of trouble with like visual vertigo stuff, and it was taking some time to manage that. So yeah, that's where we are now. So we're in January, and then I started making some changes and making progress, and instead of waiting until I got that diagnosis in July, I started doing something in January. And that made a huge difference, because I kind of went in without a diagnosis. I'm like, I just feel terrible. I don't know what to do. I need to start somewhere. So that's
absolutely. And I love that you did it anyway, you're like, I'm just going to go do it. I think it's a common misconception about vestibular group fit specifically of people like, well, I'm going to talk to my doctor first, which I always support people talking to their doctor. I'm not telling you to ditch your doctor. It's not my MO, but I am saying that you can still do stuff about this and join group and all the things without a diagnosis. And most people figure out either what they have from the diagnostic course that you go through in group, or just from like the education and being like, oh, this person has this and that seems really similar to me, and then having the resources and bringing them to your doctor. So I think that's awesome the way you went about that. And I love that you're like, I'm going to do something about it before.
Yeah.
That's great.
I had to. I was just
Totally.
like, I was not well. And I'm like, someone tell me what to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Then the other thing I wanted to mention that you said very eloquently, but I really want to double down on because it's important for people to know, is that BPPV absolutely positively does not present like this. Like neuritis can get weird, Meniere's can get weird, migraine can definitely get weird. It can all get weird, but BPPV doesn't usually get weird like that. Like it's pretty mechanical. It does the same thing over and over. It will only be positional. You will not just be like spinning out for no reason with the room in front of you. And an
Yeah.
Epley maneuver will, if it's in the posterior canal, is going to make you better, or a barbecue maneuver if it's in the horizontal canal. So it's really important, I think, to remember that and recognize that, like you said, because the Epley maneuver is not going to treat literally any other type of dizziness or vertigo for sure.
Yeah, it's all good to know now. At the time, I'm like, okay, sure, that sounds, but yeah, the
Totally, it's
more,
not your fault.
yeah, and the more I started like doing the coursework and seeing, and I'm like, no, it just doesn't feel right. And I kept saying it, I'm like, this doesn't feel like what I had. This doesn't feel like what I had. And then going through like vestibular migraine stuff, like I could see some overlap, but to me, it felt more like neuritis,
Distinct,
and
and
that,
then
yeah, for sure.
for sure. Neuritis and triple PD is, I think, one that's like kind of gets not ignored, but like gets not as much as attention as vestibular migraine gets. But vestibular neuritis can be really difficult, obviously, and it can turn into both vestibular migraine, which hopefully it hasn't for you, and then also triple PD, of course. And so it's important to kind of look at each of those things both in a vacuum by themselves and also combined with the other stuff, which you've
Yeah.
done a really good job at doing. So tell me, since last January, this is probably going to come out in 2025, just from the way things are looking right now. So since January 2023, maybe this will come out on your anniversary. That'd be fun. Um, since then, what things have been the most helpful? You can also tell us what has been the least helpful besides the Epley maneuver. We clearly know that that was not helpful.
Yeah.
So what have been the most and least helpful things that you found have worked for you?
Sure. So January 2024. So it was the start of
Oh, yeah,
this new year. Yeah.
2024. So exactly
Yes.
1 year. There you go.
Yes, exactly. So okay. Probably the first thing that was super helpful was I had a really good support system. My mom was here, my husband, like they just jumped in. They could see I was in like really rough shape and I needed to focus on this, and they kind of just took over like all of my day-to-day stuff so I could focus on this and healing. And I would say like early on, the stuff that helped me the most was the nervous system regulation, which I, again, had never heard of. I didn't really think that was something that was so important. It is the most important thing to do at the start, like for sure. It was huge for me because the anxiety was so new and I didn't know how to manage it. And I would just wake up and I would be like, so nervous that like I was just like it's gonna start, it's gonna happen. Like I would just have like a moment where I felt weird and I'm like, oh, like here it is. And that's a terrifying way to live your day because like you could feel good and like I was feeling better, but every once in a while I would just have these little moments where I just felt a little dizzy or I'd be in a weird area and I'm like, I don't feel good. But now I know like, okay, that's just like it's just your nervous system, it's just your like everything needs to get back to baseline. And figuring out that nervous system regulation was the way to do it was really, really helpful. Breathing and grounding was very helpful for me. I made a schedule. Like I would just do, I would set aside time. I would just go and sit in like my chair and I would breathe and I would just make time for it throughout the day. I would find time to do some grounding, and I just started doing that. Like, I didn't really know if it was going to work, but I'm like, I'm just going to do this because this makes sense. And then
Totally.
I focused, yeah, on the basics again before anything else. Like, how you explain the basics in group is like, just pick the low hanging fruit, just do what you can do right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I was in such a bad place. I'm like, what can I do? Okay, I can focus on my sleep. And then
Mm-hmm.
I start with, um, what did I do? Morning routine, my sleep, started having protein for breakfast, like just all those things. I'm like, I'm going to do a couple things at a time. And then, yeah, I just started going to bed super early, waking up at the same time. It was winter time. So I got one of those like sad lamps or whatever.
Oh
And I
yeah, love it.
because it was
Same.
not daylight here until pretty late, but I would just start doing that. And like, as you know, in group there's a lot of information and it tends to get
Yeah.
overwhelming. I'm like, I can't
Mm-hmm.
do too many things all at once. I'm just going to focus on this stuff. So just gradually adding things. I focused on like, hydration, exercise eventually. Like, I got to that, but it was all just doing that, like what you and Dr. Jenna call that, like B plus effort, like 80% effort. That's good enough. Like, just do what you can. And I could see that was doing something. I could see an improvement within a couple of weeks. So
Love it.
at that time I was just like listening to all the coursework, the modules. I would like go for a little walk around the block and I would just like listen to some of the coursework. And
Love it.
the one that really stuck with me was figuring out the positive neuroplasticity. That just like clicked so hard for me. And I was like, okay, so my brain got kind of scrambled. Everything just kind of, my vestibular system was like rocked. It was put through a washing machine. I just need to get it back to where it was. So telling my brain, like, hey, this is fine, repeating things over and over. You always say it's like telling a kid, like, say please and thank you, say please and thank you. It reminded me of potty training. My son, we were always like, pee goes in the potty, pee goes in the potty, pee goes in the potty. And I'm like, this is the exact same thing, but I'm just telling my brain, like, it's okay. We're not dizzy. This is fine. So,
I'm gonna start
yeah,
using that analogy.
yeah. Pee goes in the potty. It makes sense. I'm
It
like, yeah,
totally does.
that's what we do when we're trying to teach their little brains something that they don't know. And, mine, like the wires got scrambled or something happened, or I forget like the exact technical terms, but it really made sense. And it was like, okay, so this is how I'm going to help my brain. I'm eating protein because that's also going to help my brain. I need to sleep because that's when I'm going to heal properly. I need to get deep sleep. Like, it all just made sense. So that was kind of what I started doing. And then for me, what worked, when I found all the VOR exercises, and I know that's kind of like, that's not something that works for everyone with a vestibular disorder. And I was like, let me try this because I
Love
feel
it.
like I can see something happening when I start. Because I was very robotic at the time. I was not moving my head. I was very like Frankenstein-y. So I'm like, I've got to get my head moving again. And then I see like how to walk with head turns, how to move your head. So I just did those things and I started walking like 1, 2, 3, turn my head, 1, 2, 3, turn my head. And then it got easier and I could feel myself getting looser. And I'm like, this is working. This to me feels like I'm just getting my vestibular system back on track. And I worked on my gaze stability. I did all your VOR ×1. I did the tracking. I did the saccades. I did this all by myself. Two
Which
tolerance.
I
Yeah.
am so proud of you for following instructions. Like I
Yeah,
know all the instructions
you
are
had
on
them
there.
all laid out. They're all
I
laid out. I'm
do.
going to read them and I'm going to follow them.
I'm really proud of you. And people ask me all the time, do you have VOR exercises in vestibular group fit? The answer is absolutely yes, we do, but it will absolutely not be the first thing that you do. And I think that every vestibular therapist, whether you go to vestibular group fit or you are a vestibular therapist who works in a clinic, you come to see me, whatever, I promise you, if you are seeing a good vestibular therapist, you will not just be sent home with a list of head shaking exercises.
Yeah.
Because unless you are like the most regulated human being on this planet and you are like, yoga, zenned out, not anxious. You're like, I'm good with my dizziness. Now, how do I fix my gaze instability? It's not going to work until your nervous system is calm.
Mhm.
And I love that you're like, I started with the basics. And if you don't know what the basics are, it's what we call in group this like grouping of things, grouping, that's not what I meant, but grouping of things that you need to do before you do other stuff. And exactly like you said, you are like the best direction follower on this planet. You need to do the lowest hanging fruit, not all of them at the same time. And no matter how many times I say that out loud, I feel like some people listen to me and some people do not. You did an excellent job, and this is why you feel so good.
Yeah.
So, before you begin the basics, there's a video to watch that says how to do this very explicitly. But then after that, you will focus on nervous system regulation, meditations, and types of breathing, thinking about chronic dizziness. So the neuroplasticity video you learned about or heard about, sleep, eating and hydration, movement, and then there's beginners workouts also there, so you can find them easily. All of
Yeah.
those
And
things together are
yeah,
important.
exactly. And like not everything was done on day one, obviously. Like this all took weeks and weeks to
Yes,
do, let me work on this. Okay, now I'm feeling a little better. Let me try this. Let me add this. And yeah, like and I was trying to think of like, okay, what do I need to do? What am I after? So I'm like, I need to get back in the car. I need to, like I could see the things that I wanted to do and there was a way to do it. So then I started watching those like the OPK videos and all those visual vertigo exercises. Like some of those were not super fun, like
definitely
not
not fun.
definitely not, but I just kind of like I had to build a tolerance to it and then I had to increase my time in triggering environments like in stores, crowded places. Like I could not be anywhere for more than a couple minutes at a time without I'm like I need to get out of here. Like there's too much going on, there's too many things moving
Yeah.
around. I literally did like a couple minutes and then I would have to get out of there. So I just
How
yeah,
long
like
can you go
that's
in there now?
oh, I'm fine now. I can go. Yeah, I am totally fine. I still like am not a huge fan of, hanging out at like
I
Costco
mean,
for over an
yeah.
hour, but I can
No, me
do it.
neither.
Yeah. So I still get in, get out, but at the
Hmm.
start I couldn't go in. Like I don't know if you remember my first trip to Costco. I was like,
Yep.
I brought my hat, I brought my
Yep.
headphones, I walked around the parking lot before I went in. I did breathing
Hmm.
and grounding. When I was done, I had like a tiny list and then I just got out of there and I'm like, I don't care. I don't need anything too badly. I can come
Hmm.
back another time, but I need to practice. So
Hmm.
that's that's kind of like how I was doing everything because I could see like if I tried to do too many things at once, it wasn't quite working. But yeah,
Absolutely.
so I was building up my tolerance. I had my toolkit, I had my exit strategy, my
Hmm.
exit plan always. I was like, if this goes south, I need to like get out and go into the car, and I could
Hmm.
I could try my best, like I could try, but there were times where I'm like, I just need to get out of here. So, yeah, and just kind
Yeah.
of working my way up, building the tolerance, and
Hmm.
obviously understanding my vestibular disorder helped. Like after I got my
Hmm.
diagnosis, it made me feel more confident about my recovery and then I was not afraid to push myself a little bit more.
Hmm.
And yeah, just prioritizing basics first, the consistency over the motivation, just every
Hmm.
day, like I got to do this, I got to do this until it becomes second nature.
Totally.
So like my morning routine, my breakfast, sleep routine, and
Hmm.
I habit stack. I just like if I take my
Love
kid to
it.
the park, I do some balance exercises with him. I
Love it.
always do breathing and grounding when I get in the car before I start it. And yeah, do it dizzy, do it scared, and then don't be afraid to push yourself in a healthy way is kind of what worked for
Totally.
me in group. So lots of
Amazing.
things.
I'm so proud of you, but it always is lots of things. I think I say this every week, but like someone is always asking me, what's the one best thing I can do? What's the best supplement, medication, exercise, whatever? And it just plain old doesn't exist. It's not a thing. And exactly like you're saying, like when you put in the work, it takes time. That's the other thing is like getting a human to try and change their whole life is really hard. But that's why do just one thing. And this applies for if you're like determining what new cleaning supply you should use so you can get rid of the not so good for you stuff or anything else. Like I was talking to my friend this morning and she's like, this is way too much stuff to replace in my house. And I was like, well, just replace your all-purpose spray. And then after that, replace your toilet cleaner. And then, so it just take it just like anything else, one step at a time. Don't try to overhaul your whole life because if you do, even if you can change the way you sleep, eat, drink water, regulate your nervous system. If you even could do all that in a week, it won't last forever. Like it'll last way longer. Like this is a lifestyle change for you. I can almost guarantee that even if you left group tomorrow morning, you would continue to be able to do these things.
Absolutely. And I always think back to okay, there was some sort of silver lining with this because I've learned so much just about lifestyle changes, day-to-day things. Like I eat my same breakfast. Like I don't care. It gets the job done. It's got 30 grams of protein. I eat it like while I'm packing up my son's lunch in the morning and making my husband's coffee. I just like eat it. It's boring. It's like yogurt and like almond butter, protein, whatever. Like it does the trick. But like
Love
before,
it.
I would drink coffee and like maybe have a couple of crusts of like peanut butter toast that my son didn't eat, and that was my breakfast. So like that's not good, you know. And it's you just kind of don't really think about it when you're just like, oh, I'm busy with a kid, I'll drink some coffee, I'll like not eat breakfast. But now it's just like I have to do that like to
Totally.
get through my morning and to
Mm-hmm.
feel like a person and not just be drinking coffee all the time, which I now I'm on
Totally.
decaf. Like
Look at
it's so
you.
funny. Yeah. Decaf, sometimes I'll have a half calf, but
Yeah, and that's
yeah,
okay.
so it's a lot, it's been a lot of positive changes. And it's hard. It's hard when you're in there and you're not feeling great and you're like, I got to start doing something. But definitely like the slow and steady way was what worked for me for sure.
Totally. Love it. All right. What things did you try that maybe didn't work for you? Do you have a list of those things?
Yeah, so obviously like at the start doing nothing, just kind of waiting and
Yeah.
seeing, that did not work. I was like, this is gonna
Yeah.
eventually go away. No, I had to be proactive about it. Figuring out the anxious dizzy cycle that I was on, that was not helping. And once there was a name to it and a don't worry, this can be managed, like you're not stuck like this forever, that really, really helped. That
Good.
was a game changer for me, implementing that positive neuroplasticity. What didn't work was doing too many things at once. I think I did have
Yes.
a little chunk of time where I was like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And then if I didn't pace myself or if I didn't take some time to rest, I would feel it the next day. Like I would notice it. And
Yes.
even if you're having a good day, like when I started driving again, I did like 3 minutes and I stopped and I felt like I could have done more. But I'm like, I'm just going to do a few minutes, then I'm going to breathe and ground and I'm going to go home. And I went home and I
Love
took a
it.
nap and I was like, okay, that was a big deal because you don't realize it at the time, but pushing too much too early is kind of, it can backfire. So that didn't really work. I found that being hyper vigilant was not helpful because you kind of can't help it when you're noticing all these symptoms. And then I would get like, oh, like, what's that? Like, and I probably wouldn't have even noticed it before. It would have just been like, oh, that was weird and just ignore it. But it's hard to kind of like just notice every single symptom. You can get paranoid and you can get worried and panicked, and it just doesn't help. So there was something that I think it was Jen in one of those videos. She said, if you have a symptom, you like can acknowledge it. You can like
Yes.
allow it to come in,
Yes.
and then you can, like accommodate it. So I would find if I didn't do that, I would get panicky. So if I was like at the car wash and things started moving and I started feeling like a little weird, I would just say like, okay, this is fine. You're in a safe space. You're going to be out of the car wash in a few minutes. It's okay to like feel weird because there's things moving. It's going to pass in a minute. And then like, how can I support my body? How can I accommodate my panic? And I would just kind of like either close my eyes or do like some breathing. I like the physiological sigh. I use that one a lot. That's a fan favorite. So I would just try and find places to do that instead of just like panicking when something would happen. So I
Love
really
that.
would try it. Yeah, like pull myself out of a situation. And I found that not being prepared was not super helpful for me. Like it kind of, unfortunately, it takes out a lot of like spontaneity. Like if I have to go do something, I can do it, but I always feel like, oh, I don't have my toolkit, I don't have my hat, or I don't have my water. And then I start getting like a little fussy about that. So I do try and go in a situation as best I can and have my toolkit and my exit strategy. But if I don't, it's kind of not great for me. So I do like to be
Mm-hmm.
prepared, as prepared as I can be, as possible. It's such a fine balance because it's like you do want to get to a point where you're like yeah, just do it dizzy, do it scared. Like, yes, but also be prepared, know yourself, know your limits. It's okay to like say no. There was a few situations where I just kind of had to put some hard boundaries, and everyone was very respectful. I'm like, I just don't think I'm ready for that yet. And I didn't want to just be like, okay, I'll just, do. I could feel I wasn't ready. There was certain times where I was, but there was other times that I wasn't. So, yeah, it's just, it's tricky, and trying to do a million things all at once definitely did not work for me. So that was my list of things that didn't work. But for the most part, like I found all the things in group to be super helpful. And there's a lot of stuff that kind of I found it didn't really seem like something I needed to look into, like certain medications or like neuromodulation devices. Like, I'm not like, oh, I'm going to do this supplement and get this medication and do this thing and do that thing. Like, it was just, I'm like, no, I'm going to see what's there for me. This thing is for somebody else. And it's not like, and like you said, everyone's saying like, oh, what's the one good supplement, or what's you kind of have to trial and error and see what works and see what your needs are. Like, I didn't really need, or maybe I did early on, but I did all of this without any sort of prescription medication. I just kind of went in with I'm going to try this, and then I'll like add some vitamin D, and then I'll add some magnesium. And the CoQ10 was really helpful for my brain fog, because I felt so fuzzy and like, just like I cannot focus. Like, what, I'm just having such like fuzzy days. And then that I found was really helpful. And I didn't even start doing that until like the spring. So that was already like 4 or 5 months in, but everything just took some time. So yeah, and it just, what worked for me is not going to be the same thing that's going to work for everybody else, or what
Absolutely.
didn't work for me. So it's so,
Mhm.
it's so interesting looking back on it and kind of seeing what's going to be
Mhm.
good for one person versus someone else. But yeah,
For sure. And I
yeah.
think that one thing that's really important that you said, you're like, I'm not ready for XYZ, or I don't like to do things unprepared. But I think you get to add the word yet to the end of that, because there is a lot that you probably can do that you're like, hey, maybe not yet or whatever. But just like you learned how to drive again, or went to a new situation again, or whatever, with a new outlook, right? Where you're like, okay, I didn't really love that before, but I I can drive now, I can go to the store now, I can do whatever. And you learned how to do it with these things, right? The same exact concept's going to apply to learn how to do it without it, which is scary and new. And you're like, oh my God, I just figured out how to do it with it. How am I going to learn to do it without it? But you can do it if that's the goal. And if you're like, I don't really care if I can't do this without a hat, then okay, great. But if you are a person who, like, I'd like to be able to do this without my hat and my loops, then just practicing kind of the exact same thing is going to get you there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still have my hat in my car, and
Yeah,
there's
love it.
time, but if I, like, the last time I went to like Costco or Walmart, I didn't grab it, and the
Mm-hmm.
lights weren't so bad, and the big open
Got
space
you.
wasn't so bad. And I know
Uh-huh.
it's because I've just built this tolerance for it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I couldn't do any of that stuff early on. Like, there was
Mm-hmm.
no way. There was absolutely no way. And I just, yeah, it's crazy to think about just those times where I'm like, I won't be able to do this again. Like, how am I ever going to do this again? Everything seemed so hard. And
Uh-huh.
there was, I think it was a few weeks ago on one of the podcasts, one of the members, I think it was Danny, she was saying she
Mm-hmm.
would like go to the store and look at the other women and be like, you're not dizzy. You're not
Yes.
dizzy. And I was doing that at pickup, because I'm like
Mm-hmm.
coming in like all like a robot, and I'm like, they're moving their heads, like
Mm-hmm.
they don't feel dizzy trying to bend over and pick up their kid. Like, and it wasn't helpful, but it's just
Mm-mm.
the thoughts that go through your brain, and you're just, but again, it's like, you don't know what anybody else is going through. It's just
Yeah.
one of those things. Like, I heard her say that, I'm like, oh my God, I did that too. And you're kind of like embarrassed, because now I'm just like, no, I can look at someone else and not think that, because
Totally.
it's not such a big part of my day to day
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Like, it is sometimes. Like, sometimes I'll still get a little like weird, when I'm somewhere, I'm like, oh, that just kind of made me feel
Mm-hmm.
weird for a second, and just kind of let it happen, because I'm like, this is still, there still might be little blips, there still might be times where your brain gets a little confused, and it's okay. You just kind of have to work through it. But I can see how much progress I've made in the past
Mm-hmm.
year. And yeah.
Love it. I love when you can
Mm-hmm.
see progress too. I absolutely love that. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted something that you said that also Danny said of like, that person's not this and that person's not
Yeah.
that, right? Everyone does it. It's like we all have this comparison issue, every human on this planet. But there's a word, and one of my favorite ENTs who's going to be on the show, her name is Dr. Jessica. She's an ENT in South Carolina. She's at ENT Chat. Posted this on her story today from a guy named Adam Grant. And it says, my favorite new word is sonder. The profound awareness that every person you encounter has experienced a lifetime of hopes, fears, loves, and heartaches that you'll never know. Each moment of sonder is a reminder to appreciate how little we truly grasp about each other's lives. And then there's like a second definition, but I think that it's such a difficult thing to look at someone and be like, you might be having a really difficult day. You might be in a severe amount of pain. You might be incredibly dizzy. But technically, 3 in every 100 people, that's 3%. Is that 3%? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't know why I was like, can I do mental math right now? Actually have vestibular migraine.
That's so
So if
crazy.
you have at least 100 parents at a school, especially if they're mostly women, right? 100 moms, let's say, at a
Mm-hmm.
school, 3 of them probably have vestibular migraine.
Yeah,
So
totally.
even just in like maybe your kid's grade or like the upper school or the lower school, like you are not the only parent with this. So you are not the only kid in your school with this. You are not the only college student. You're not the only person at your job with vestibular migraine. And it's really so common. Triple PD, not as common as vestibular migraine because not everyone with VM has triple PD. Really common. Vestibular neuritis, I don't know the exact vestibular neuritis, how many people have it, but it's also really, really common. Its annual incidence of vestibular neuritis is between 3.5 and 15 per 100,000 people. In the United States, I don't have Canadian stats, but in the United States, I'm sure it's similar in Canada, is
Mm-hmm.
4 out of every 100,000 people. Like that's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of people. Maybe not
Yeah.
every single person in your school, but like, or your kid's school or whatever, but that's a lot of people, you guys. And I think
Yeah.
it's not thought about enough.
Yeah. And then once you start telling people like, oh, I had this thing, and they're like, oh, I've had that. Oh, I had
Mm-hmm.
some kind of vertigo. Oh, like, and then everyone just has some sort of story about it in some different capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like someone was like, oh, I've had that before. There's a maneuver you can do. And I'm like, yeah, I
I don't
know
have
about
that
the
one.
maneuver. That's not it's not what I had. Mine was weird. I don't know, but yeah, and then so my mom also had something similar when she was my age but didn't know what it was, and she was sent to the hospital, and she said like her eyes were darting around and they were like, "Oh, this is stress." And
Mm-hmm.
she had a one-time event that has never happened again. So I don't know about that. And like my cousins have had it. So I'm like, it's just like it's so not neuritis, but like
Yeah.
some sort of vertigo of some sort. And then once you sort of figure out that like vertigo is not a diagnosis, it's just a symptom of a million
Yeah.
different things, and it can be presented a million different ways. Like some people just might have internal spinning or room like external
Mm-hmm.
room spinning, or they might like, and being dizzy is such like that term, like obviously as you know, it comes with a lot of definitions, and
Yeah.
it's hard to explain, and it's good to learn more about it. Like I loved learning about
Mm-hmm.
all of this stuff, and it made things just a lot clearer instead of just, and it's
Good.
good information. It's not just like googling it and then having
Mm-hmm.
this, lots of lots of different information. So yeah.
Absolutely. Going to a place that you
Hmm.
trust, whether it's
Yeah.
here or a doctor or whatever, and being like, what information can I get? Remembering that your doctor probably had literally one slide on dizziness in medical school, but that is
Hmm.
neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But go to a place that you trust to think about and talk about your vestibular disorder, whether it's an online platform, at your doctor's office, at your physical therapist, making sure that they are first a vestibular specialist, because if they're not, then go somewhere else.
Yeah. And my
My 2
doctor, he
cents.
did, he emailed me some, they're probably pretty old, some
Mm-hmm.
Cawthorn Cooksey
Oh, yeah.
exercises. Are
Mm-mm.
those like
Mm-hmm.
old school? They seem
It was
pretty
old
old
school.
school.
Yeah.
Yes. So he gave
Uh-huh.
me those, and I was like, I'm not doing this. Like one of them was to like roll on the ground. And I'm
Yep.
like, I'm not getting on the ground and rolling. Are you insane? So I just didn't even touch those. And that was like a few days after I came home from
Mhm.
the hospital. And like my husband's like, "Are you going to try these exercises?" I'm like,
Bro.
no. I'm like, I
Uh-uh.
do not feel safe. I just kept saying I didn't feel safe.
Yeah,
And it was
totally.
like, I just didn't touch them. I found them recently when I was cleaning. I'm like, oh,
Random.
these are like, I could see a couple of them, like, the ball through the legs or whatever. I'm
Yeah.
like, this seems very old timey. And it didn't say anything about breathing or grounding in between. It
Mm-mm.
was just like, do these things. So I
Yeah,
did not do those. Yes, I
proud
did
of
your
you.
exercises. I did not do those ones.
Proud. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cawthorn Cooksey exercises and Brant Daroff exercises are ones that we generally shouldn't prescribe, but people still do. But also, you should take your vestibular rehab advice from a physical therapist. Like, you should take your medical advice from your medical doctor, not the other way around. Like,
Hmm.
am I educated on medications for vestibular disorders? Sure. But am I going to go around prescribing them? Absolutely not. Right. And doctors don't get any education literally on exercises to prescribe for dizziness or exercise in general, at least in the States. Uh, and honestly, it's like not helpful, therefore, for your doctor, whether they're an orthopedic surgeon or not, to tell you about exercise, because not most, many surgeons will be like, we'll just never do that again. And that's not helpful advice.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to tell everyone? I have 4 rapid fire questions for you, but I want to make sure
Uh,
you got in everything.
no, we can go to the rapid fire. Let's
All
do
right, let's do it.
it.
First, what's your favorite part about vestibular group fit?
The community. It is a
Nice.
safe space. Everyone gets it. Everyone knows what it feels like to be dizzy. Everyone has those hard days and they've been through it. So there's a lot of support and we can always ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
which I do a lot. And no matter what the question is, like I remember asking really early on, I was like, I feel really clumsy. I keep dropping my keys. Like, what can I do? And Dr. Jenna gave me like a very nice explanation. She said,
Mm-hmm.
try throwing a tennis ball against a wall. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay. So I
Uh-huh.
just started doing that. And then that was helping everything else as well. But just sometimes there was
Uh-huh.
such a simple question and then a simple answer. So I love that. And I did in the summer, I asked a question about how do I navigate going to the aquarium? And you gave me some good tips and you tagged another member who actually worked at the
Yes.
aquarium. And then she gave me some good tips. And I was like, okay, great. I feel good going into the aquarium. It was weird. It was wavy. There was like a weird carpet, but it was fine. The best thing was actually like having that backpack, like the heavy backpack. So I just felt more like stable
Totally.
to the ground while everything else was moving around me. So
Love.
it's nice to, yeah, ask those questions and get those good answers from you and Dr. Jenna and from the other group members because everyone has some good advice and it's so helpful. And I also love reading the wins that we post on Saturdays.
Me
It's like
too.
no matter how small, I just love reading them. And that's actually one of the reasons that I joined VGF was like you always posted the win Wednesdays. And I was like, okay, you know what? These people are managing their dizziness. They're getting better. I'm going to do it too. And that was a big thing that convinced me because I was sort of on the fence. I was like, should I do this? Should I wait it out? And then all those wins, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that. So that's my
Yay.
favorite part about group. The community is just everyone's just so nice and sweet
So
and
nice.
helpful. Yeah. And like it's kind of, it's not like not to sound like it's not the greatest like group to be a part of. Like, yeah, we all have
Totally.
vestibular disorders. Like it's like kind of shitty. Sorry,
Yeah, no,
but at least we can
it's
help each
true.
other out
Mm-hmm.
and it's everyone gets better, everyone has something to contribute and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a safe space to be in. So I
I
love
love
I
it.
love group for that. Yeah.
I love that too. And I'm like, I'm obsessed with this group. No, I'm not obsessed with me in this group. I'm obsessed with literally the like hundreds of people in this group who are
Yes.
all in a world that's like really not so nice to each other. These people are, every single one of you is so nice to one another.
Yeah.
And even if someone's like, hey, I started this medication or I have a question about this thing and it didn't work for someone, the answer will literally be, this didn't work for me, but I really hope it works for you. And
Yep.
it's like, what? Who are
Yep.
these people? They're so supportive and so kind. I love
It
it.
is. It's so true. It's just like, good luck. Like, I hope it works for you. Like, this worked for
Yeah.
me. This didn't work for me. And then that's
Uh-huh.
when you see too, like, just how different everyone is, and what's going to work for one person isn't going to work for the next person. And yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
good community.
Absolutely. All right. What's the biggest goal you've reached or want to reach as a member of VG Fit in your life?
Yeah, I think having the goal of like being dizzy free was too vague. That was like it didn't really work because it's like, oh, I don't want to be dizzy anymore. Okay, I had to break it down into the smaller chunks. You call them bite-sized pieces. I was like, what do I want to do? I want to do my normal things. I want to drive. I want to sit on the floor and play Lego with my kid. I want to go to the store without feeling drunk. I want to bend over. Like, obviously, I've got a lot of Lego to pick up. I have to be able to bend over and not like feel weird and dizzy doing it. So there's just an answer for everything. Like, I wanted to cook and clean better. I wanted to read. One of my wins like a couple months ago was I read a whole book. Like, it took me a long time because darting your eyes back and forth when they're not
It's no
like,
joke.
it's very difficult. So getting back to that, I would do like a chapter at a time, and then I finally finished that book. I wanted to just go to the park and not feel so dizzy and so exhausted, and every single one of those little goals, there was a way to do it. There was like, how can I drive again? Here's a module. How can I cook and clean? How can I manage my tiredness throughout the day? Like, what can I do? There was always an answer. There was always something to try. So just kind of doing those little things, it just makes my day to day so much easier. So yeah.
I love it. And I love that you had those goals. And I'm going to be totally honest with you and everyone listening. I despise, truly despise the goal, I want to be dizzy free. Because although I will help you get you there, I will for sure help get you there. It is not helpful because then if you're like by next week or by 6 months from now, it didn't work. It's like, okay, well, what have you achieved? And if you break them down into bite-sized pieces, little or goals, you A, will absolutely achieve them. And B, it will take the focus off of the dizziness, put it onto the function, which will therefore reduce your dizziness. So I'm a huge fan of that. Good job.
Yeah, for sure.
Love that your goals and that you met so many of them. Reading your wins every week makes you so happy.
Yeah.
Okay. It does. What's one thing you wish you knew when you got diagnosed that you know now?
I kind of wish someone like spelled it out for me, like explain it to me like I'm 5. Like, your brain went through a pretty intense ordeal. Your vestibular system got kind of like whirled around, and it felt like you were in a washing machine for days, and it's going to take some time, but you can retrain your brain. It's just overcompensating. I did not know any of that. I wish someone just told me it's going to be okay. This is what you're going to do. There's a way to do it. I wish I had some like actionable first steps to take, because I was kind of sent home with like, good luck, like the spinning stopped, best of luck to you. But I just felt awful. And I also wish I didn't spend so much time wondering, like getting so hung up on the diagnosis, because I didn't like, I had one at the time, sort of, but until I got my proper one, I was just kind of going in, I'm glad I went in with like, well, this is what I have. I don't really have a proper diagnosis, but I just went into group and just started anyway. That was helpful. I just kind of wish I didn't spend so much time thinking like, what did I do that caused this? Like nitpicking every single thing. I was feeling really sorry for myself. It wasn't helpful. Like, it just wasn't helpful at all. And I was so hung up on like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Like, it just happened. Like, there's some, I'm sure there's some explanation like in my body why it happened. My ENT was kind of like asking if I was sick beforehand, or, I was like, my son started kindergarten. I caught every single cough and cold and COVID and noro, and he brought home every single everything. I have never been sicker in my life that year before I had my vestibular disorder. So she's like, your immune system might have just been at a super like not great point, and the neuritis just sort of like flared up. There's not, you could have been sick, you could have not been sick. That's kind of how she explained it to me. I'm like, okay, I guess, because yeah, I was not, like, my immunity was very, very low. I was super sick. Sorry, that's just what happens when you have a kid that's like 4 years old and
That's what everyone says. Oh,
I'm so sorry, just like fair warning, when they're school age, it is no joke. They're gonna get sick,
yeah.
you're gonna get sick. You gotta just do your best. But yeah, nitpicking and sort of like trying to figure out like what I did to cause this to happen, like it just wasn't helpful. It really wasn't. I'm in a good spot now to look back and be like, hey, it's okay, like it just happened, you'll get through it. But that's kind of what I wish
Totally.
I knew at the time. And I just, once I just went in and started learning and implementing the material, that's when I noticed a change, and that was the best thing for me.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And I really, I think I say this all the time too, but I'm going to reiterate, uh, the people who don't ask why into an eternity, I get asking at first and you're like, what the heck? Like, I don't understand what the hell just happened. Totally makes sense. But if you have a chronic vestibular disorder where you're like constantly asking, like, why did this happen again? What did I do wrong? And like placing blame on yourself, that is not helpful. It's not a good mindset to be in, and it actually will elongate your recovery time. And the people who I see who do the best, just like you're saying, and say, like, I'm going to stop asking myself, why did I do this? Why did this happen? And just go about it and be like, okay, this is happening. I know what happened. I know what's happening slash I know I feel this way and this is what I'm going to do about it. And honestly, that's probably going to be more helpful than anything.
Absolutely, because the anxiety is so real, and for someone who has never really experienced that in my life, I was like, this is rough. Like this is really, really rough, and I didn't want that part to get worse. I wanted to just get on top of that because I'm a pretty chill person just by nature, and then having these sort of like doom and gloom thoughts and feelings, like it was just so hard. I'm like, I've just got to
So
change
hard.
my mindset, change my attitude, and
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's nice when you start seeing some results from it, because it really, like, it does work. You have to just be gentle with yourself and be kind to yourself, and saying all those,
100%.
yeah, like we call them, my 6-year old, he calls them strong words. So we don't
Oh,
use, yeah, we don't use strong words. Like I don't say like, oh, I hate this, I'm having such a bad day. I say like,
ah,
I'm really disliking how I'm feeling
mm-hmm.
right now. It just kind of takes that like
Totally.
harshness away from it. So yeah, we
Yeah.
don't use strong words. And he's kind of like
That's
the
so
strong
cute.
word police. If he hears us saying a strong word, that's a strong word.
That's
Like,
adorable.
yes. Yeah.
I'm obsessed.
And it's helpful. Yep.
It is helpful. It's a good
Hmm.
tactic. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
All right. And then last but not least, what's one piece of advice you would offer to others who are going through something similar to you?
Hmm. Yeah, it's easy to just kind of say like, trust the process, because it's kind of what I did. Like, to be honest, I did just kind of, I went in, I trusted the process, I trusted you, I trusted the material and all the education and everything behind it. But I understand when some people are hesitant to just trust the process, because maybe they're coming in from a place where like trust has been broken, or they've been brushed aside, or gaslit or dismissed, or they've been dizzy for so long they don't know where to start. This for me was like a few months. Like, that's how long I was dealing with dizziness, and it was brutal. So I could see, like, if you've been dealing with dizziness for so long and someone's like, oh, just do this, you're not going to want to jump in 100%. But it's like, I just felt so lost and I didn't know where to start. And then in group, there's literally a start here. This is where you start. It's like laid out, and that's what I needed. So I would just say it's worth getting educated about. It's worth changing your routine. It's worth putting in the effort. And I know there's people that are like, well, I can't eat breakfast. I don't like breakfast. I can't eat that much. Like, I know you hear that all the time. I see it. Like, it's hard. Yeah. Like, maybe you don't want to eat 30 grams of protein like when you wake up, but why don't you try? Like, get used to it. It's worth it. Like, it's, like, yeah, we know it's boring to go to bed early and eat breakfast and exercise, but that's what's going to make you feel better. It's like,
100%.
you just try, like, just try it. And that's what's going to ultimately like raise your threshold and help you build a bigger bucket. And that's what we're going for, because everyone's vestibular disorders, they're so nuanced, they can overlap, there's common symptoms and criteria. But I would just start, like, just start there, because there's no quick fix. Like you said, there's no one medication, one supplement, one breathing technique. You have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't, and just keep trying and ask questions, because there's a community that gets it, and there's support, and you're going to cheer us on. And when we have big and small victories, it's nice and it's validating, and that is worth its weight, just to feel heard and just to feel validated and supported. And that's what I found in group, and why I feel so much better now. So I
I'm so
guess,
proud of you.
yeah, just like I would tell someone, like, just start slow, start
Yeah.
slow, go slow pace.
Mm-hmm.
Look for glimmers instead of triggers. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just finding those nice moments in your day that's not just like, oh, is this a trigger? Is this a trigger? It's like, no, look for the good moments. And I started doing that as well. And just
Mm-hmm.
give yourself grace. Like, there's days where it's going to be rough. Like, just be gentle with yourself. Like, everyone's so nice and kind in group to one another. You have to do that for yourself as well. So yeah, just give yourself some grace. Like, it can be rough, but there's so much to learn and do and achieve and come out the other side. And yeah, I don't know, just kind of going through all this stuff. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this was like a
Mm-hmm.
year ago. I just felt horrible. I felt so
Totally.
horrible this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a year just kind of went by so fast. And just thank goodness I'm feeling better than I was back then. Because
I'm
and
so
a lot of
happy.
it is just thanks to you and group. And I can't thank you enough for what you've done for me. Like, truly, I really, really, I just, I'm so glad I found you.
Oh,
I'm so
you're
glad
so
I found
sweet.
you.
I'm so glad you're here, and I'm
Yeah.
truly it is truly my pleasure because there's just not enough information out there about these disorders, and they are so incredibly treatable, and you did it so well, and I'm
Thank you.
so proud of you for being such a good directions follower and starting with the start here, which I get a lot of questions that say, where do I start? So I'm gonna
Literally start here. I'm a good student. I'm glad
you're a really
I
good
did group
student.
fit well. So yeah, and it's just, and
I'm
it's
proud of
great.
you.
Like, there's so much in there. Like, I
Mhm.
always, like, when I needed an answer, I'm like, oh, I bet you there's a module on this. And like, someone else's goal might have been like to fly, and
Mhm.
there's so many
Sure.
people in
Mhm.
our group that are like, oh, and how do I fly and how do I travel? That didn't really pertain to me because I didn't need to like get on a plane, but there's info in there. This is how you get on a plane. This is what you do. There's just like anything I needed that I searched for, it was there. And if it wasn't, I would
Yay.
ask it. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It's,
Like I'm behind this Zoom right now, there's a question about microdosing medications. And I don't think that there's an answer in there, but if you don't think I'm gonna literally hang this call up, record the answer, and post the link, you'd be wrong. Because that's exactly what I'm going to do. Because every time someone's like, hey, I have this question, if it's not on there, I will literally put it on there because I think it's so important for it to be my brain just like on a platter. That's what I think vestibular
yeah,
group fit should be.
it
So
totally is. It totally is. Yep.
good. Yay. I'm so glad it was so helpful and you did all the things and now you're feeling so good.
Yeah, feeling
Congrats to you.
great. Thank
Yay.
you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun. I'm so
Yay.
glad we finally got to talk because I just feel
Me
like you
too.
were just like a part of my life every day for the past year. And now
So
that we just
sweet.
had this, it's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.